I'm going to give away the ending right from the beginning. I'm here to offer constructive criticism of positive psychology, the science of personal happiness. I think the field is seriously flawed and is missing something essential. Here's why. Positive psychology exclusively emphasizes individual actions like practicing gratitude, of treasuring relationships with friends and family, and avoiding a focus on material possessions and wealth. And all this is absolutely valid and absolutely true. The science unequivocally shows that these actions increase happiness. Each of these actions are examples of what positive psychologists refer to as character strengths. Character strengths are actions we can take as isolated, autonomous individuals to increase our own personal happiness. So positive psychologists and the rest of us applaud people like Bellamy Schaffner, who recently shared her own personal story on the Scary Mommy website. Bellamy reports about how 2 difficult pregnancies disrupted her own small business and led to a significant loss in income, and then eventually to a life in a small apartment without a car. And as Bellamy is going through these experiences and desperately trying to meet these challenges, she reports that she is happy, and that happiness is even easy, and that we can all choose to be happy if we just simply make that choice. Now, Bellamy's strength of character is truly impressive, but should Bellamy have to rely solely on this Herculean strength of character to meet these challenges? We need to recognize that stories like this emphasize individual responsibilities to such an extreme amount. Stories like this completely ignore the role of the larger culture and economy. And this is a very American approach. The scholar and social critic Barbara Ehrenreich notes that America is a land of personal responsibility and bootstrap pulling. For instance, this makes it easier for us to ignore social problems. If the poor are poor simply because they lack character, then social inequalities and social injustices must not matter. And it's easy to translate this to happiness. It's easy to get the idea from positive psychology that if Bellamy is unhappy, it's perhaps simply that she doesn't have enough strength of character. But again, should Bellamy have to face these challenges strictly on her own? Shouldn't we think about the nature of our culture and economy and think about ways that these can affect happiness? And this suggests the flaw in the serious omission in positive psychology that I mentioned earlier. So much of our society and culture make it extremely difficult for us to practice positive psychology. And that's what I want to talk about now. Structural factors, like the nature of work in the United States, like the fact of income inequality, and also the constant drumbeat of advertising, to give just some examples, make it extremely difficult for positive psychology to complete its mission. And in fact, positive psychology is not going to be able to complete its mission unless it addresses and directly does something about these structural impediments that are in its way. So I want to first talk about work. America lags far behind most of the rest of the world in family-friendly work policies like family leave, and also with policies like vacation time and sick time. In addition, Americans work a lot of hours. According to the OECD, the average worker in the United States in 2018 put in about 1,800 hours at work, while workers in the Scandinavian countries of Denmark and Norway only had to work about 1,400 hours that year. And not coincidentally, the Scandinavians tend to be the happiest people on earth. We also need to recognize that work gives us emotional fatigue that interferes with our family life. Research indicates that the emotional fatigue that we experience at work regularly follows home at the end of the day and interfere with our relationships with friends and family. We need to realize that we don't live in castles that have magical drawbridges that we can close up at the end of the day to protect ourselves from this work-induced emotional fatigue. So while positive psychology is correct when it urges us to nurture relationships with friends and family, it doesn't give us a good way to do this. How can we spend enough time with friends and family when so much is demanded of us at work? Positive psychology doesn't have an answer because of the extreme emphasis on individual responsibility. Instead, we need to think bigger. We need to think about the structure of our culture and economy. And there's so much else that positive psychology doesn't recognize. For instance, America has some of the highest levels of income equality in the world, And research indicates that this level of income inequality makes its citizens, us, very distrustful of each other, very competitive with each other, and also develops almost toxic levels of individualism. Obviously, these character traits are going to interfere with the happiness-making character strengths espoused by positive psychology, like valuing community, valuing relationships, and also practicing gratitude. We also need to recognize that the United States practices an extreme form of unregulated capitalism, often referred to as American corporate capitalism, or ACC. Again, research indicates that American corporate capitalism develops, encourages, gives us values of self-enhancement, while it actually actively discourages and even suppresses values of kindness, community, and trust. And unfortunately for us, the values that are cultivated by American corporate capitalism are negatively associated with happiness, self-enhancement, while the values that are actively suppressed by American corporate capitalism, kindness, community, and trust, are positively associated with happiness. American corporate capitalism also makes it very difficult for us to meet basic psychological needs like autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Decades of research on self-determination theory indicate that satisfaction of these needs is essential for all of us to feel happy. And perhaps this rings true for you. If you're a college student, I'd imagine that you felt happiest when you're studying something you genuinely and sincerely interested in, and not something the college required you to take, and not something somebody hectored you into taking by telling you that it might lead to a job, autonomy. I bet you've also felt happiest when you felt a basic sense of mastery over your life and studies, competence, and especially probably if you felt genuine emotional connections to at least a few other people, relatedness. And this is a key takeaway from positive psychology and self-determination theory. We're happiest when we're able to fulfill basic intrinsic needs. Unfortunately, American corporate capitalism prods us to chase after unfulfilling extrinsic goals like fame and fortune. So it's difficult for us to feel a genuine sense of relatedness under American corporate capitalism because our culture stresses such intense competition. It's also difficult for us to feel a genuine sense of competence under American corporate capitalism because we're always prodded to buy new consumer products in order to impress other people, an extrinsic goal. Furthermore, the people around us are trying to buy better products than we have, and new products and new services, fashions are constantly emerging that set ever higher standards of materialistic success. Obviously, this is a race that none of us are ever going to be able to win. And finally, it's difficult for us to feel a genuine sense of autonomy under American corporate capitalism because success is so narrowly defined in terms of fame and fortune. Too many of us spend too much time chasing after these illusory and unsatisfactory kinds of pursuits. For instance, we spend too much time chasing after jobs and careers based on the salaries and social prestige rather than our own intrinsic interest in the area. And there's so much else that positive psychology doesn't recognize. For instance, positive psychology doesn't recognize that we're constantly bombarded with advertisements under American corporate capitalism that damage our happiness. These ads constantly implore us to want, to buy, to feel envious, to covet. And they also make us feel like we're being left behind and that we're not measuring up. It's estimated that Americans see as many as 5,000 advertisements each day. And in 2019, advertisers in the United States spent $150 billion with a B flooding us with advertisements. Many of these advertisements are intentionally designed to lower our happiness and then tell us that buying their product is going to make us happier. For instance, an advertisement for an acne treatment targeted towards teenage girls tells the girls that they should talk to their boyfriends about advice dealing with acne, but then tells them, oh, that's right, you don't have a boyfriend, do you? Ugh. Yes, these ads purposely inflict emotional and psychological wounds on us in order to hawk their products. And the ads directly oppose the messages of positive psychology, encouraging sex instead of love, competition instead of kindness and generosity, social comparisons instead of intrinsic motivation, and most of all, the idea that we can find happiness by buying the right consumer product. So what can we do? or excuse me, one other problem that American corporate capitalism, or ACC, does to us that positive psychology doesn't recognize is it treats us like a commodity. A commodity, a bushel of corn, for example, has no inherent worth or value in a market economy. A bushel of corn's value is solely determined depending on the laws of supply and demand. If corn is in short supply and demand is high, corn is valuable. American workers are treated exactly the same way. Unlike the happiest countries in the world, the American social safety net has huge gaping holes in it, and it's very easy for American workers to fall through these holes if the market loses interest in us. And if that happens, the value of American workers is about the same value as an extra bushel of corn in a year of lots of corn. American workers in that situation has very little value. So what can we do? Social programs are certainly some part of what we can do. The country of Denmark has a program called Flexicurity, where businesses are able to hire and fire workers pretty much as needed, but the government supplies a strong social insurance program that gives good income support, job training, and education. Notice the Danes don't have the level of income inequality that we do. The Danes don't commodify their workers, and also the Danes have a strong social safety net. And as I've mentioned, Denmark is perennially near the top of the world's happiness rankings. So what are the solutions? We certainly need to keep listening to positive psychologists when they encourage us to practice gratitude, to feel optimistic, to treasure relationships with friends and family, and to avoid materialism. But we also need to think very carefully about the structure of our economy and our culture. We need to restrict advertising. We need to drastically reduce income inequality. We need to make it so Americans don't have to spend so much time at work. And we need to very much strengthen the social safety net. We need to recognize that the very fabric of American society is in direct opposition to the message of positive psychology. So, one of the things that has to happen is that although the message of positive psychology can be part of how we change the fabric of American society, the message alone is not going to be enough. Positive psychology must become more assertive. It must become more activist. Positive psychology needs to directly attack the social impediments, the structural impediments that stand in its way. So we need to build a society that truly values family life, that truly values intrinsic motivation, and does not commodify its workers. We'll all be happier for it. Thank you.